Welcome to A Founder's Life. I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. On this show, we dive into the real stories behind the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how we pursue a more balanced and meaningful life along the way. This podcast is sponsored by Thanks, helping founders like us scale with reliable remote talent. Email founders@thanks.com, that's THANKZ.com, with the subject line, A Founder's Life, and you'll receive preferred pricing. Well, today I'm excited to be joined by Rusty Fuhling. Rusty, thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Leo, for having me. Sure, Rusty Fuhling. I have a company in the Kansas area in the United States, Fuhling Management and Accounting, and we provide fractional CFO and accounting services for companies around the U.S. primarily.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And what I'd love to start off with, can you talk to us a little bit about your work journey, sort of what brought you to where you are, and then a little more about what your business is doing for your clients?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. So I think it was 1999. So back in the 1900s, for the younger crowd, I was working for a CPA firm in Kansas City, and I was just working way too many hours, Leo. I know you've never done that, but working way too many hours. And so much so, Leo, that I ended up in the hospital. The acid reflux and just that stress was just eating away at my body. And I wasn't eating right. I know we've talked about health in the past, but it was after that hospital stint that a colleague of mine said, "I can't believe you haven't started your own business." And so sometimes it just takes a trusted friend to give you that affirmation. And so literally April Fool's Day of 2000, I launched Fuhling Management and Accounting with 3 little clients. And one of those little clients are one of our biggest clients over 26 years later.
Wow, that's a great story. I love that.
Yeah.
And talk to us about, so, for business, you've
Yes.
described that a little.
Yeah.
And talk to us a bit about family, what that looks like for you, what that means to you.
Yeah. So again, early days when I was at that CPA firm, our 2 daughters are 3 and 5 years old. I would leave the house in the mornings. They would still be in bed. By the time I'd get home from work, they'd be back in bed. I was just missing out on life. And so making that switch to say, I want to be intentional about, family, faith, business were kind of my three tenets that I was really focused on. And there's definitely balance and integration built into that. And so today, our little girls have now grown up, and we actually have 2 granddaughters now, and just having more of that work-life balance, work-life integration just makes such a difference in hitting those purpose goals where we can spend time with family. And so, yeah, we're all close. We're within 30 minutes of each other, and probably see our grandkids 2 or 3 times a week now. So
Perfect. And if they annoy you, you can hand them back.
that's exactly right. Return to sender. That's right.
And talk to us about health. Obviously, I can see a bunch of medals in the background there.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how health looks for you, whether that be mental health, physical health, nutrition, running.
Yes. So those are just a prompt for today. Since I know you're quite the runner, but we talked about that as well. But yeah, it was about I think I was about to turn 50 years old, so a few years ago. But I told my wife, I said, "Hey, before I turn 50, I want to run a 5K." Leo, I'd never run before in my life, so a 5K sounded pretty daunting. And she goes, "Oh, that's sweet, honey. You should do that." And so, I'm thinking, how do I train for a 5K? And next Sunday at our church, our pastor gets up and says, "Hey, we're going to do a partnership with a group called World Vision to raise money for clean water around the world. And we're going to run a half marathon or a marathon to raise funds for that." And my wife kindly elbowed me and said, "You should do that half marathon thing." And I thought, okay, that's different than a 5K. I don't know if you realize that. So that was my journey, my second half of life here as far as health. I'll tell you, and I'm sure, I know you've experienced this too, but just doing something like that, like ours was definitely for purpose for, beyond us. But boy, personally, it really helped. Just a lot better eating habits, a lot better sleep, a lot, good weight balance now. So I think, finding purpose sometimes can help trigger, hey, let's not only help somebody else, but we get helped in return.
Definitely. I think it's so positive in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And
What?
I also
Yeah.
think it's very meditative for me when I get out. I mean, I had a nice run this morning. There's nothing that's
Yes.
both meditative, it's a great start to the day, feels good.
Yeah. One of the things, Leo, that came out of this I wasn't expecting is, I don't know if you ever run with a friend or other colleagues, but I've had so many incredible conversations on the running trail. I actually started a website just under my name, rustyfuhling.com, but the subtitle is Lessons from the Walking Trail. And it's just lessons that I've been learning in business and life along the way that I've just been posting out there and sharing stories. But what's really neat is I got to go to Ethiopia and Kenya last summer. And I mentioned partnering with World Vision. I got to actually see the Ethiopia World Vision headquarters where they go out and do the digging of the wells and help provide that clean water. So running, which I thought was just going to be a little 5K, has literally taken me to Ethiopia, to Honduras, to Canada, to all different places. And again, not to win medals necessarily, but just to make impact. And sometimes that's just walking along the trail with another friend.
That's beautiful. And what do you like to do for fun? I mean, I'm assuming running's fun, so that's part of it. But what else do you like to do
Yeah,
for
yeah,
fun?
running's fun. Yeah, again, I love the walking trail, but we live on some property. We bought an old house built in 1860, so an old farmhouse years ago. And we love hosting groups. And so we will have church groups, school groups, different groups out for bonfires. And we used to do hay rides and all kinds of fun things. But love hosting and just creating space for people to connect. So that's definitely one of the things. And again, when you begin having grandkids, boy, definitely grandkids will keep you busy. So love doing field trips and just fun little things with a 4 and a 6-year-old these days.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's I was funny. I mean, 1800s, that is a decent old
That's a
farmhouse.
decent old,
I
yes.
mean, for America, that's like ancient. I joke because I just came back from the UK.
Ah,
Okay. I mean, the newest property I'd lived in London in the, 30 plus years before I moved
yes.
to LA was built in 1910. That was literally the
Okay.
newest property I'd lived in.
Wow. Wow.
My parents' house, I don't know, probably that kind of age, but the church nearby is in the center of London.
Yes.
It lists vicars back to the year 1100 on the
Wow.
wall.
Wow. Wow.
And then I went down to the south coast where I spent a lot of my summers and weekends
Yeah.
as a child. And the house was built in the
Oh
1700s.
my goodness.
The church was built in the year 930.
Wow. Wow.
The little village that's in principle nothing special. It's just a small village on the south coast of the UK.
Yeah.
It's got a Roman name, been around for. It's funny that it puts a. I was there with a couple of American friends,
Mm,
and it puts things in perspective.
yeah.
For them, everything
Yeah.
is in the last 250 years. Well, yeah,
Right,
that's a
right.
blink of an eye. I actually
Absolutely.
love when my
Yeah,
daughter, I think my daughter was probably in about fifth grade, that's a while
okay.
ago, and the kids had just studied
Yeah.
history.
Mm,
And, they were doing little skits, like little plays on
yes,
the different things they'd
yes.
learned. And, afterwards, a friend of mine came up to me and said to me, "So, what do you guys call the American Revolutionary War?" And I'm like,
Mm.
"We don't really talk about it." He's like, "Why? Sore losers?" I'm like,
Ouch.
no, we study thousands of years of history. We talk about the Romans, the Battle of Hastings in 1066, the Middle Ages, America in the
Yeah,
1700s wasn't. I mean, may now be the world's superpower, but back then wasn't even important. I mean, like
that's
India,
right.
for example, would have been the corner of the Silk Road.
Yes,
That was important.
yes.
I mean, America beyond the king's ego, there was nothing important about America.
Yeah, I think perspective is so helpful. Yeah, I love that history. I get that when I was over in Kenya and Ethiopia this past summer, sometimes you have different perspectives on things and sometimes getting out of your comfort zone. And I know you've done some incredible traveling, but sometimes stepping into those areas where, yeah, you just assume everybody's just like you. And then you step into something that's like, oh my goodness. And sometimes you may have some empathy for their situation, but you also can have some appreciation. Wow, appreciation for 17, a building in the 1700s and getting to have that incredible history that you were just describing. So I love that.
Yeah, and so you seem to have a pretty balanced life, hence why you started your business.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about that, what balance looks like for you. And,
Yeah.
balance, again, I often say this, but balance to me is that center line. No one's
Yeah.
permanently in balance.
That's right.
Tax season, you are not in balance. But overall, how do you look at a balanced life?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your comment reminded me of flying an airplane. If you think pilots have talked about this, where it's not a straight line when you're going somewhere, you're constantly making those adjustments. And I think for perfectionists, no, you got to stay. That can be really difficult. And so a couple of things that were helpful, Leo, just not too long ago was going through an exercise to kind of help develop some purpose. Like what's your purpose? What are you made for? And for me, I came up with 5 words. They're encourage, guide, equip, listen, and serve. And what's really neat about those is those can be used in business and in personal life. And once you kind of determine, hey, what is your purpose? All of a sudden, if you're leaning into those, boy, it really balances things out because you're doing the things you're made for. A book by a guy named Patrick Lencioni talked about working geniuses, and he broke it down into 6: 2 that you're a genius in, 2 you're okay in, and 2 that are frustrations. And if you're always working in your frustrations, that's going to feel like unbalance all day. Leaning into your purpose, into your geniuses, man, that's part of that balance. And for me, again, it's probably faith, family, and business kind of stuff. And so, making sure you're putting on top what's those priorities, and making sure that's the focus, and you're not getting distracted by the shiny objects.
That makes a lot of sense. And talk a little bit about one of the questions I always like is what has been a pivotal moment in your life?
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely, we talked about one just in business as far as taking a leap in entrepreneurship. Sometimes it's I'd say another pivotal moment is deciding to say no at certain times in business. When around 2020, we started getting tons of inquiries to purchase our business, and that's pretty common these days. And we'll probably still get at least one solicitation a day, and those can be very tempting. But again, those pivotal moments, sometimes you can get pulled into, well, that sounds very attractive, and learning to say no. I think it can be, again, one of those pivotal moments. This year, I had an opportunity to go back to Honduras for I think the 6th time to do some mission work there, and man, it's looking forward to it. We've been planning this for sometimes, and stepping back, understanding the political culture going on in the US, and just some travel challenges, stepping back and saying no, not for now. We needed to do that. And that can be tough as a leader in one of those pivotal moments to say, hey, I know we promised we're going to do this, but circumstances have changed and we need to unpromise. And so those kind of things, saying no has been one of those pivotal moments.
And you're so right there on the sometimes you may have said yes, but
Yeah.
you've realized that was wrong. And you're
Yeah.
not doing anyone a favor. Like,
Yes.
especially, for example, a potential client. You've said yes
Yes.
to a deal, but then you've realized that actually you're not right for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they'd much prefer a no,
That's right.
even if that's after the fact. I mean, sometimes you got to admit
Yeah.
it. No,
Eh,
we shouldn't have accepted this. I'm sorry.
uh,
We're not right.
yeah, Leo, about year 10 in our business, we took on the biggest client we'd ever taken on, doubled our business overnight. I'm shopping for new cars. This is great. We hit it. Within 6 months, we lost that client. I mean, I don't know that we'd ever lost a client for any service reason to that point, and we lose this massive client. Just heartbreaking. Well, the problem is they were not a good fit for us. We were not a good fit for them. They were way too big for what we do. And what's fascinating is that same client came to me, I think year 20, so 10 years later, and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this work for us? And I'm like, no, no, we tried that before. Between then and in that year 20, we had identified that ideal client profile. Sometimes we don't take the time to do that. We're just chasing the deal. So again, that's one of those pivotal moments too, is, defining who you serve best, and don't get sucked into the big, oh, this would be great, because for that situation, it was saying no was the right thing. It was an expensive lesson, year 10.
You know, the other thing I think is really important for people to learn is sometimes you got to fire a client.
Yeah.
And for me, there's one of 2 reasons really. It's that small little client that actually is just not worth the work.
Right.
Sometimes, and the
Yeah.
smallest clients, by
Yeah.
the way, over the years, the smallest investors, the smallest, like the people where the money is more important to them are the ones who
Mm,
actually scream the loudest, are actually the nightmare. And sometimes you got to say, we're not a good fit for you. The other
yeah.
one is I'm a massive believer as I've got older in the no arseholes rule. I've definitely fired clients who I'm not saying I have to love everyone I work with
Yeah.
because I don't, but
Sure.
I can't Just I can't cringe having that call coming up thinking, I just don't
Yes.
want to speak to this person. That I
Yes,
don't need as
yes.
a client.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there is a exercise that we've done over the years, and it's called the pumpkin plan. And basically, the idea is any kind of produce you're growing, you need to weed out those other things that are going to suck the nutrients out of that main pumpkin in this case. And part of that is what you just talked about. Sometimes you have to prune. You have to prune those that are sucking the life out of. When Leo calls, am I going? Oh, it's Leo again, or hey, it's Leo. And so knowing when to prune, yeah, it can be that's a great exercise. Can be painful, but yeah, great reminder of that.
And so what's one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say don't do it alone. I think so many times business leaders get stuck in the nobody's going through or have gone through what I'm going through, or I'm having trouble making payroll or paying bills or just facing a challenge. And so don't do it alone. There's some incredible advisory groups, roundtables, mastermind groups. There's different names for them. So many are now virtual, and so that's where I've seen so many business leaders just thrive versus just survive when they have that supportive community. So I definitely encourage, yeah, look for ways to engage in community.
Great. Good advice. And thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Leo, thank you. I will look forward to seeing you on the running trail soon.
Thank you. And how can people find you?
Hey, Rusty Fuhling on LinkedIn is probably the easiest, or Fuhling MGMT is our company website. But yeah, thanks so much, Leo. Appreciate you having me on today.
Well, thank you. And thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and please leave a review.